In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the various pieces that make up a Unity game. Things from the project to the scenes to assets, all the way down to game objects and components. We're going to see how all of these interact to create our game. So again, this lesson is going to be more lecture style, so feel free to sit back and listen. In the next lesson, I swear, we're going to start getting into Unity. But for now, let's just try and understand what all these pieces are that make up our game. So the largest piece, or where everything lives, is called the project. You can access that through File, New Project, Open Project, or Save Project. Now the project is actually more of a folder structure and sort of a database that defines and remembers where all these objects are and the connections between them. So I've just opened up my Explorer window here. Okay, here we are. And this is our project. So whenever we create a project, you can see here that this is the Digital Tutors demo. And if I bring down my Unity taskbar here, we can see that this Digital Tutors demo is our project, and we're inside of the scene DT demo level. So when you create a new project, it's going to go in and it's going to create a lot of folder structures and a lot of files. So there's two main parts of a project, the assets and the library. Now the library is the brains of the project, and like a real brain, we do not want to go poking around in this area. The library is sort of remembering every single connection between everything in our entire project. Our entire game is based on keeping the library untouched. So we do not ever want to come into the library and edit anything. What we want to do is work inside the assets folder or work inside of our scene. So we don't really want to edit anything inside of our Explorer or inside of whatever we use to manage our files on our operating system. We want to be able to, or we want to do everything through Unity. And to do that, or to edit our project, we have access down here to our project panel. And you can see here, if we jump into the assets folder, this is almost an exact mirror of our actual files and folder structure. So while we technically can edit things in the asset folder on our hard drive, we never want to do that. You always want to make changes here inside of the project. And to show this, we have this little plane here that has this black material on it. Now if we go into our project panel in Unity and rename this to anything, you can see nothing changes or nothing is broken. That's because Unity is going in and behind the scenes actually updating the library and all of the connections that this file is connected to, so everything stays stable. However, if we go into our assets folder and begin changing things, for example, here is our black 2 material. If I come in and change this, what's going to happen is Unity will update. However, as you can see here, the connection is lost. So it's going to show us this pink material saying, I completely lost track of what I should look like. Something is wrong. And so what we can do is simply reselect that and drag our material back on top of that. However, as you can surely see, if you do this to your entire scene, you are going to have a heck of a cleanup left on your hands. So never, ever rename, move, or change things in the assets or the library folder. Later, when we're learning about importing assets, we can copy things into this. We can copy things into these folders, but we want to do all of our editing through this project panel. And that will keep our game stable, and we will not run into any issues. Now inside of our project we have a scene, and our scene is currently this DT demo level. And a scene is what is going to hold all of the pieces of an individual part of our game. So normally people say a scene is like a level. However, that's a little bit limiting. Scenes can be levels, and they often are, but they can also just be different parts of our game. For example, if we have a startup screen that we want to show with some options, that would be a separate scene, because from there we could load in another scene or another level. Other things like high scores, starting menus, control interfaces are all done within these scenes. So think of a level, or think of a scene as either a level or an individual part of your game. And these scenes are visible inside of our file structure as .unity files. Now finally, we have the assets. And if you come up here, you can see we have a variety of assets we can create in Unity, such as the various scripts, prefabs, materials, animations. And this is just to play animations or to animate inside of Unity. And other things. Now, whenever we create a new asset or import an asset, we are creating a file in our hard drive. So if I create a new material, you'll notice that if I jump back here, give it a second to update, our new material file is created. So all assets are what I like to call real. They live in our folder structure, and they can be copied, moved, deleted, and we have to be careful with, of course, doing that. And all assets and scenes need to be modified using the project panel. Now finally, even if we have all of this done, we still have nothing in our game. If I open up a new scene, you'll see that nothing is here, although I still have the entirety of my project, my materials, my meshes, everything is still here, but suddenly it looks like nothing has happened. And that's because really, until we begin populating a scene with game objects and components, we will not see anything inside of our game. So we can have all of the assets in the world, but until we turn them or we have game objects linking to them, nothing is going to happen in our game. So with the introduction, or with these next two pieces of our game, we're going into a virtual level. So game objects and components only live inside of a scene, which is why when we opened up a new scene, we do not see anything. And the hierarchy is defining or telling us or showing us what game objects are inside of our scene. So I'm just going to open up our demo level again, and let's take a look. Now, earlier, you'll remember I said that this floor here is an asset. It's a model. It's an actual file on our hard drive. And that was not 100% true. Whenever we see something in the scene view, we're actually looking at a game object. Now, everything inside or anything inside of our game is going to be a game object. And you can think of a game object as simply a container. It can hold almost anything. However, a game object by itself does not do anything. So we have to combine a game object, which is kind of the container, with components, which define what the game object does. For example, if I just create an empty game object, we can see here it's got nothing except a transform. So it only has translation or position, rotation, and scale. If we try and look at it inside of our game, we're not going to see anything. And that's because a game object without any components is essentially invisible to the game. Now, this game object can actually become anything, and we change game objects, or we add functionality to game objects by adding components. So for example, if I wanted to put a light on this or make this game object into a light, I could add the rendering light component, and suddenly my boring game object becomes a light. So everything we see in our scene, everything we see in our hierarchy are game objects with attached components. This floor is not the asset. What this floor is a game object with a component that loads up our asset. And this is an important distinction because we have to be careful and understanding that game objects and components really make up our game is better than thinking that we're actually using assets to assemble our game. Assets are an incredibly powerful thing, and we need assets, but the entirety of our game is solely defined by the game objects and the components on those objects. If we take a look at our first-person controller, it is simply a normal game object with a few special script components. So everything we do inside of Unity is essentially creating new game objects, adding components to them, and then modifying how they interact here inside of Unity. So again, let's just do a quick recap of the parts of a Unity game. At the top level is our project, and this is the folder structure and sort of the database in the back end that organizes all of our objects, our assets for us. We never want to go inside of the library folder because it's incredibly easy to break our game. After that, we have scenes, which we can think of as levels, but can also be things like high scores, menus, and other individual pieces of our game. Finally, we have assets, which is another real folder, and real files on our hard drive, and these can be many things: animations, audio, meshes, scenes, scripts, textures. All of these are real assets. Finally, inside of our scene, we have two virtual kind of objects: a game object, which is just a holder, and then components, which defines what the game object is actually going to do inside of our game. And by combining various game objects, components, and importing assets, we can create any type of game that we can imagine. So now that we understand more about the Unity framework, let's now jump into the interface and take a look at how we can open up this project, move around inside, and playtest our game.